Hi everybody, Claudia from the Wee Garden Homestead here, and I have the story of a quilt. Not this quilt, because you've already seen that story, but the story of quilt number 14 for my 12 in 24 challenge. And I am so ecstatic that I was able to get through this challenge, do my 12, plus two more. It feels great. So last year, like 2 days before Christmas, I had a request from the now 13-year-old granddaughter for a quilt that covered her body. And I took that as a quilt for her bed, a full-size quilt. And I couldn't do it last year. I just didn't, there was just not enough time. So I took this upon myself, and this was truly a labor of love. And I worked on it from about February. I got the idea of what I was going to actually do, and I started on it then in February. And that is the one that you've seen in a couple of my Whip It Wednesdays with the hearts. Now, I don't have any footage of me working on it. I worked on it on and off between other projects, and I finished it up just before Christmas. Well, just before Christmas. Today's just before Christmas, but I finished it up just before, the day before we were supposed to see them and exchange gifts. So I finished it up. I got it in the wash, and while it was in the wash, the morning we had to go meet them, I took my shower, got ready to go, and said, oh, I should make a pillowcase. So while it was in the dryer, I made a pillowcase to match. Now, I don't have a lot of footage, but I was able to get it up on the wall just before we left and get some footage. And I'm gonna show that to you now. It's a little different than the rest of my reveals, but you'll get to see it. And I'll probably do another heart quilt like that and actually do more of a how-to, because once it came out, I just absolutely loved it. It is a scrap quilt. That is my passion. That's how I started, was basically with scraps that people had given me or remnants from Joann's, because they're so inexpensive. And it is truly a scrap quilt. It was truly a labor of love. It was a lot of work. My son asked how many hours were in it, and I said, I don't know, probably at least 40. And he commented, my salty commented, oh, probably at least 50 or 60. I don't know. I don't usually keep track of them like that, especially that one, because I worked on it for so long. Now, the quilt to cover her body, to be fair, the last quilt I made for her, and she's gotten several, but the last one I made for her was 7 years ago. It was 2007, and I'll pop some pictures in, and then I'll go to the quilt from this year. But I'm just so thrilled with it, and I can't wait to show you. Thanks so much. I'm going to do a voiceover of the footage that I did before we left, and tell you all about this quilt. And then there will be some pictures at the end. And then my son, when he got home with it, he did a quilt drop for me, so I'll throw that in there too. So thanks so much. Let's go on to the footage. First thing I'm going to show you is the quilt from 8 years ago. We called it Hayleigh-Bug's Everything But the Kitchen Sink, because that one also was truly a scrap quilt, and everything was in there. So without further ado, let's go move on. Okay, so these were the best two pictures I could find, and they're not the greatest, but that's what they are. So here is the new quilt, and I believe it finished at 72 by 90. It fits her full-size bed very nicely. The big hearts were 2.5-inch squares put together, 3 rows by 6 rows, and then the corners were added in. The corners had 2.5-inch squares also. The medium-sized ones, I believe, were 6-inch by 6 by 6, and then the small hearts were finished at 4 by 4. They did come out a little smaller. They were a little bit wonky, and I did need to trim them up a little bit, but I'm just so thrilled with this quilt. And she was too. She got a look at it, and she was like, oh, it's beautiful. You'll see a yellow print in there with little red shoes on it. Those were Dorothy's slippers, Dorothy's shoes from The Wizard of Oz. They're in many pictures. There you go. Many hearts. I made her a little dress out of that when she was 3, and I had just a few scraps of that left, and I had to throw that in. what are the chances I would have gotten those two hearts next to each other when I was specifically trying not to? But that's how it goes when you're just throwing things together. So she's in orchestra. I threw in some white with some music notes and some gray with some music notes. The white parts are white on white, and they are all mismatched. A lot of them were scraps. There's probably 10 different white on white fabrics in there or more. Some of them have gold hearts on them. It was just, some of them are not true white. Some of them were gray with the music hearts. I just threw everything in there. It is a scrappy binding. It was just I think it was 3 or 4 different colors, and I just put them together and put the binding on. The back is a solid butterfly tie-dye. I didn't get a picture of it. I'm so sorry. Here we are into the pictures, the full quilt. The corners were the leftover from where I trimmed the hearts, the big hearts. I had to use them. And then I had a few of the small hearts left over, the 4-inch hearts left over, and that was what I used in the pillowcase. That was the first time I'd added a panel in a pillowcase like that. We've done the burrito style pillowcases before, but that was the first I added it in. Didn't get a lot of pictures of the pillowcase on its own, but the last picture has, there it is, the pillowcase on the laying on the quilt, just getting ready to go in the gift bag, and there's the drop. Thanks so much for joining me.